This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode is brought to you again by the Friends of the Magic Word. This week, we'd like to welcome Brent Lipp as our newest friend of the Magic Word. Welcome, Brent. Thank you very much for joining the rest of the friends with your financial responsibility and helping to pledge your support to the Magic Word. We appreciate that because it's because of donors and people who are patrons like you will allow this podcast to go on long into the future. We thank you very much for your financial support. And if you would like to learn more about how you can help us, just go to the magicwordpodcast.com right along here and just click on the tab that will say Become a Friend of the Magic Word. It will give you more information about how you can support us and why your funds are so needed. Well, this week we have something that's going to be kind of fun and amazing. First off, we do have a contest, and I want to tell you a little bit about that, and I'll tell you about it in the back end. It's for a chance to win a physical hard copy of Seventh Heaven by Lewis Jones. This is made available by Charlie Randall, our friends at H&R Magic Books, and we'll talk about how that you can get in on that contest at the back end of this podcast. But we've also got something else coming up later next week, and that's going to be the Collectors Expo in Austin, Texas. This is an annual event that's been going on for a few years. Bill Smith has put on. David Sandy has assisted. There have been others who have had this in the past, and Bill's been doing a great job of this. And again, it's going to be in Austin, Texas this next week, and the dates are going to be April 13th through 15th, and so we will be providing daily updates here on the Magic Word Podcast. So be sure and come back each day for daily updates, so this way that you can hear and see through maybe some video we might be able to post on the website of some things that are going on. Certainly this is a seminal event for those who are collectors such as myself, of whatever that you might happen to collect. This is a sold out event this year, and last year we all got to attend the museum, that is David Copperfield's private museum. That was part of our registration, which was awesome. This next week we're going to get to go see Ray Anderson at Esther's Follies and have a barbecue. A lot of other things we have planned. I know that Charles Green's going to be giving a talk about Ionia, a book that he's working on, as well as Trixie Bond's going to be talking about Texas magicians in the past and who have passed and their importance to our international community. Anyhow, enough of that. And so I want to say the reason we're talking about that is because this week we're going to be talking to Chuck Caputo, who's going to tell us about Anverdi. This is a very interesting gentleman from Holland who he's going to tell you more about and some of the things that he has created, that is Anverdi has created, and it's quite a legacy, certainly, and a little bit about his history. And so those of you who are interested in the history of our art, I know you're going to be learning a lot and love this particular episode. If you hang around till the end, since you're watching this on YouTube, instead of just listening, but if you are watching, towards the end, we will have another 10 minutes in which he will demonstrate a few of the items that he has in his collection. And also, if you go to the website at themagicwordpodcast.com, there you will see some videos from Chuck Caputo of him demonstrating some of these items of Anverdi. So let me introduce our guest this week, Mr. Chuck Caputo, here on The Magic Word. This week, we're going to be talking with someone who knows a lot about some history of something I think would be of interest to many magicians out there, both magicians and mentalists, but everyone who enjoys history in particular. I've been wanting to talk with this gentleman for a while. We're going to be talking about some products of Anverdi and also specifically about Anverdi himself, who was from Holland, someone who had performed at FISM back in '61, when it was in Switzerland, and also he had lectured at the FISM in '64 in Barcelona. He'd also received a creative fellowship from the Academy of Magical Arts back in 1975. Among his inventions, I'm just going to read a few here that I see, is Bolt of Lightning, the Mental Die, Bionic Bunny, Talking Skull, Dial, a Mental, Barking Dog, Poker Chip Effect, Anverdi's key box, Pad of Miracles, among so many other kinds of things that he's created over the years, and author of a couple books then as well. And someone who is an expert in all things Anverdi, and also someone who is deeply interested in the rich tapestry that is the art of our magic. Please welcome Chuck Caputo. Hey there, Chuck.
All right. Thank you, Scott, for having me. I certainly appreciate it. And thanks for that great introduction.
You bet.
Yes, I am a collector of Anverdi. I probably have the largest Anverdi collection in the world.
Wow.
It goes back quite a while.
So let me ask, as far as your interest in history goes with magic, is it specifically limited to Anverdi, or I mean, when you came into this to begin with, were you just kind of interested in electronic kinds of things, or apparatus, or what?
That's exactly correct. You know what? Anything electronic or that has a mechanical nature to it. It all started, Scott. I've been performing professionally as a full-time magician. I'm out here in Pittsburgh, by the way. I've been performing since 1986, I believe. And around 1987, I was fortunate enough to do a stage show here in Pittsburgh on the same bill as the great Del Rey.
I was just about to ask about Del Rey, because he would be an inspiration. You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, and you know what? I was maybe 24, somewhere around there, and I was just so amazed. I couldn't believe what he was doing.
Yeah.
I actually performed first, and I was backstage packing my stuff up, and my dad was with me that night, and so he said, "Come on out and watch this guy. He's really amazing." Prior to him going out, he was backstage, which I know now he was taking apart his table, and he was holding the PC board in his hand. He was making adjustments to it and so forth, and he had pretty bad emphysema at that time, so he was having a hard time breathing. But yeah, so I went outside and I watched the show just like my dad was, and I tell you what, Del Rey, in my opinion, was probably the best magician of the last 150 years. You know what? The only one that I think might be more creative would be Robert Houdin. Del Rey did exactly the same stuff that Houdin did in a sense, but he put electronics to it, whereas Robert Houdin was watch work. Now, and the thing that, which I'm very fortunate, Del Rey was a very nice man, and so we became friends, and so we talked on the phone for quite a few years afterwards, up until his death, as a matter of fact. He was a very, very nice man, and backstage, he was nice enough to show me a lot of his close-up stuff, because when he was done with the stage show, then he was going to do his close-up magic, which is the bird, Suicide Sam, the climbing fireman that goes up the ladder and so forth. I mean, it was just unbelievable, and so I was really amazed. So that's what got me into electronic magic. So I started to read everything I could about it and so forth. So I started to build a few props, and then somebody told me about the name Anverdi. And at this point, Scott, like, you have to remember, this is prior to the internet. So there was no internet. So
Before
I just
we go
made
on there,
calls
I was going to say
around.
one other thing too, by the way. I remember Bob Escher was a good friend of Del Rey's also. I guess you probably knew him as well, because I think Bob, didn't he fall heir to a lot of that props and apparatus of Del's?
Yeah. From my understanding, that is correct. Del was married to a local booking agent out here, Ann King, and she was about 20 years older than him. I think she just passed away maybe 6 or 7 years ago. She was 99 years old, I believe, or something like that.
Okay.
But you know what? So Dale had sent me a couple things in my, like, I have a few of his motors and so forth, and he signed a nice picture, and which I have framed to this day. But yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. And then, like I said, the name Anverdi came up, and I had no idea. I was thinking, well, what's an Anverdi?
Now, did Dale tell you about Anverdi, or how did you first hear?
No, I had called a few places that I purchased magic from, and so they said, well, if you like electronic stuff, you should look into Anverdi. And so that's how the name came up, and I had no idea who he was at this point. And so they explained to me that he was a magician / inventor from Holland, and so he built some pretty cool stuff. The first effect that I bought was his little talking skull, which I still use. It's been 37 years now, which is a really cool effect. So yeah, so I started purchasing a few of the Anverdi props and so forth, and then the barking dog. The list goes on and on. I think you mentioned quite a few of them. The spirit bell is neat. The mental die. which is the die that's placed into the black plexiglass box and the lid is closed, and
Hmm.
still from across the room, what you could do is still discern what number is facing up. Murphy's Magic has recently reinvented the Anverdi line, and they got me as kind of like the spokesman for it. So if you click on the internet and you search Anverdi, like you'll see me do like a little segment on there. But yeah, his things were primarily made with plexiglass, usually with black plexiglass, sometimes clear, all different colors really. I mean, green, yellow, red.
It seems like, as I recall, that Gene Anderson has a version of a jumbo card rise. It was an Anverdi thing that uses a plexiglass
Right.
roulette. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. He made a few different versions. He made a jumbo version. He made the one-way rising cards where the card would just rise up, and then he made the two-way where it went back down, and it would also apparently, change.
Yes.
So he made the jumbo version. He made a poker size and a bridge size, and so yeah, they were all great, and they did have some form of a clear roulette involved with it, But they were great. The only thing about the Anverdi stuff now, we're talking. I mean, he started building Magic Anverdi in the 1960s, and he started off with his liquid magic, okay,
Hmm.
which is his trays with the glasses, where the milk will rise, it'll go fill up one glass. It could be switched around, and that glass would deplete as the other one would fill up. It was very visual. So he came up with a lot of his bottles, a lot of his trays in the 60s. He didn't get into the electronics until the 70s. All right. Now his
Hmm.
mental die was really cool. I think it came out in about 76 or so. Don't quote me. I'm not good with years, but his mental die, that really set the standard, because there was talk of such an effect coming out, and so he was one of the very very few, if not the first, that actually pioneered that effect, which was really amazing, because it worked off a 5-channel transmitter slash receiver, and sometimes even a 6-channel transmitter receiver.
Hmm.
The very last effect he made was the floating cube, which is an absolute miracle. I mean, this is a plexiglass cube about 2 inches square that you could show all around. You drop it into a cylindrical clear tube and you cap it so it's
Right.
untouched by human hands. It'll still float. It'll rise. It'll descend. It'll follow your command. It'll float to the very top. Then you uncap it and dump it in your hand, and the die can be examined. That's what's cool about it. You can examine it. There's nothing hidden.
Hmm.
The tube can be examined. So that's an effect I still use to this day.
And that was the last thing that he had invented.
I believe his floating cube was the
Yeah.
last effect that he made before he passed away. He was born in 1925, by the way, Scott, and he died in 1995.
Right. Right. And so, we were talking about, you mentioned Houdon, and that was one of the first people I was thinking about being a clockmaker and creating wonderful magic types of apparatus that were mechanical of nature. And those were things, then I wondered if he was inspired by him, or he was Anverdi an engineer, or how did he, came about coming up with some of these ideas.
You know what? That's a good question, and but unfortunately he's not there to answer, so I don't know what actually inspired him. But yeah, getting back to Robert Houdin, he was the guy that actually brought magic into the classical
Right.
sitting type of arrangement, which I'm sure he would wear a
Mhm.
tuxedo, and it was a formal type of thing
Brought it
instead
from
of
the street
performing
to the drawing room, basically.
exactly from the street to the drawing room. And some of his inventions, I mean, were absolutely amazing. Kristen Fechter, a few years back, maybe 12, 13 years ago or so, he came out with a 2-volume set,
Hmm.
which I'm fortunate enough to own a copy of it. One was written in French, the other one was English. One book tells of his inventions, and the other one tells of Robert Houdin's life.
Hmm.
And the things he made, the trapeze artist Antonio Diavolo, the French baker. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, and it was all watchwork, so there isn't no remotes or anything to stop and start these things. There was just turning cams and so forth, and it would hit on a certain flywheel, or it would pause or so forth. But it was just amazing.
Did you ever get a chance to see any of Ken Klosterman's collection and some of his Houdon clocks, Robert Houdon clocks?
I did years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was in. Was it? It was a certain part of Ohio, I believe.
Okay, it was
I
in
can't remember.
Cincinnati. Well, just outside Cincinnati
Cincinnati.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He just passed away, if I'm not mistaken, not too long
Correct.
ago.
Correct. Yeah. They're going through his collection. Then now Potter and Potter is just completed the second book that's
Yeah.
available as we speak. That
Mhm.
going to be having another auction for some of his things. I know also, of course, Copperfield has many in his collection then as well. And speaking of Robert Houdin, he purchased his museum from Blau, Switzerland. So
Right.
remember when I was there last time and I had said something to David about that, or I guess to Chris Kenner, and he said, that's no longer there. Everything that was there, you're looking at now, basically. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, he's got a lot of Houdin stuff.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting too, Scott, if you check back the lineage of all the top magicians all the way through the vaudeville days and even before, they all had some type of an electronic type of a marvel. You know what I mean? Harry Keller had the Psycho, the whist player, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
it goes back hundreds of years, you know, the Davenports and so forth. They all had some type of a strange item, and that was kind of like the thing that helped lure people in, actually.
Well, the thing that always fascinated me was the Turk, the chess player.
Absolutely.
I've got all the books that were written on the Turk, and whenever I went to visit John Gohn's office one time and he showed me the Turk, it was kind of like, to me, that was the Holy Grail. I was just
Oh, that's
amazing.
amazing. That was built by von Kempelen, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right.
And yeah, that was an amazing effect. As a matter of fact, if you search me on the YouTube channels, you search magician Chuck Caputo, or you might have to search my wife's name, Sherry Caputo, Cheri. I actually built a tabletop version of the Turk, which I sold about a year ago. Yeah, you know, it's all electronic though and so forth, and it's actually kind of cool. But it's a tabletop version. The whole thing, Scott, is probably maybe 24 inches tall. Maybe.
And how long did it take you to build something like that?
I took off and on, probably about 7 months, somewhere around there. So I did sell that a while back, and I also built a version of the Great Leon Haunted House, which always fascinated me. I always like spirit effects, obviously. You know what I like: spirit bells, talking skulls. But the Great Leon Haunted House is an excellent effect, and the manuscript is still out there. So I would encourage any of the listeners, if they want to really come up with something different, build a version of this.
That is amazing. I was at the Collectors in Vegas last year, Collectors Expo, and Les Arnold, who was the nephew of Leon's, had presented that, and it was just, it was amazing. Great trick.
You know what? I've performed that for years, probably about 25 years ago at schools, like around Halloween time.
Yeah.
And it was really amazing. And I kind of put my own twist to it, where I would ring the doorbell, and it would go bing bong, and then the door, when it opens, I'd have a Grim Reaper standing there with green flashing eyes, and then the one window will slowly open, of course, up in the upper right hand corner, I believe, and there was a ghost in there. And then you'd snap off the front portion, then you'd go into the interior, and that's where you'd make the the small silk float out of the bottle. You'd make the chains rattle and so forth. But it's an amazing effect, and it's really not that difficult to build. If you go by the original manuscript, I mean, it's not that difficult to build. I think a lot of people have purchased the manuscript, but they didn't build it for some reason.
There are some people who are listening to this podcast who might be thinking we're talking a little bit too much inside baseball, who don't know what the effect is. Could you describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. What this is more or less a dollhouse. It's a tabletop dollhouse. As a matter of fact, I actually made mine
about 3 by 4 feet, something like that, roughly.
Yeah. It's a fairly large dollhouse, and so it's a really cute looking dollhouse. I mean, if you build one, you can customize it how you want. But anyway, what the effect is basically is you just ring the doorbell, and slowly the front door will open. Okay, and as that front door opens, the upper left corner, there's a window with 2 shutters, and the shutters will open outwardly very slowly, and there's an image of a white ghost that's peeking out the window. Okay, so at that point, the door closes and the shutters close, and you snap off the front part of the house and you put it aside. So you're looking into the interior of the house at this point, and the interior has broken cloth, like a patterned cloth inside. Okay, so that may give a clue to some of the people who actually know magic of how this thing works. So at this point, what you could do is you could get a little glass bottle with a scarf inside. You tie a knot and you place it inside the house. You stand away from it, and you're tilting, from the side of the house. You're actually peering into the front of the house, and the scarf will actually come up out of the bottle and start to wiggle a little bit. Probably one of the more amazing effects on there is a miniature chalk slate, which you can show its front and back. It is blank. It has nothing written on it, and you lay it down on the floor of the house inside, and you ask, "Are the spirits with me?" And slowly the chalk slate starts to jiggle, and it'll stand up and float, and it'll actually float in the house. So it stands up,
Mm-hmm.
and written on the chalk slate, very bold and white, it says yes. I mean, that's probably the best effect of the whole house. I mean, the times I've used it actually freak people out. It's a cool thing to use, especially around Halloween.
Well, that was what I wanted to find out, because again, seeing that perform for a group of magicians, that we were all fooled and interested and just thought that was fantastic. So you did this though for a live audience that was non-magicians, you say, for schools. So how does that play? And is it really, really strong, or is it just something we think is cool?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it for real young kids. These are like middle school, maybe 6th and 7th, 8th grade, and so forth. And I've done it for a few of the adult audiences too. But yeah, it played very well. And then part of it, what I would do is I would put a mason jar inside, and I'd screw the lid on, and I say, we're going to capture the spirit. So when you place the mason jar inside the house proper itself, it'll start to fill up with a mist. Okay. In the manuscript, he gives a way of doing that, but that's kind of an outdated way. There are better ways to actually create a mist. But
Right.
yeah, it's an amazing effect. I mean, so like I said, I would recommend, if someone is looking for a tabletop spirit cabinet, what I also built a cephalalgia cabinet, which is Stuart James's idea from the
Mm-hmm.
1930s. That's an amazing effect also. But it's like based on a different presentation. Like I said,
Is that kind of like
Greatly Haunted,
Dean's box, Dean's box?
sort of like it has a curtain in the front. Yes, you know what? Whereas the Greatly Haunted House, it's all like a miniature haunted house type of thing.
Okay.
What it's like, it's a baby doll house. But yeah, the cephalalgia cabinet.
If you want to
by Stuart
explain that,
James,
then also to the
yeah, what that is just an open cabinet. It's a wooden cabinet that has a top and a bottom and two sides. And generally, it has a hole on each of the sides, because like you can insert a rod through, and so you can make a ring appear on the rod and so forth. But the front part that's open, it's what it is basically a curtain rod, and it has a hanging velvet curtain. And so what you can do is you can actually take the curtain rod off, or you could separate the curtains, so the spectators can see into the box.
right.
It is completely empty, and yet when you place a child's football in there, like a little miniature football, you can close the curtain, and that ball will kick outside the cabinet. So that's one effect. Things can move in there. Things could be kicked out of the cabinet. Like I said, you could have a ring, like a big wooden disc type of ring, laid on the floor, and you could insert a rod through the holes on the sides. And when you open up the cloth
Curtains.
part in the front,
Mhm.
yeah, the curtains, yeah, the actual ring is on the rod. I mean, so yeah, it is a different, like it's a whole different idea. Like I said, it's just a matter of preference. I mean, what type of performance do you want for a tabletop? Are you looking for, like a curtain type of a cabinet, or are you looking for like a miniature haunted house? Now, Stuart James's idea was actually written up in the Jinx magazine, and I have the original copy, and I don't remember exactly. I think it was maybe 1930 something. I don't, like I said, don't quote me on there, but but the idea, the whole plans and so forth are on the Jinx
I
magazine.
suspect it's probably in the book, Stuart James, that big tomes,
Absolutely.
like 600 pages or something in there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was a brilliant performer as well. I mean, hey, we grew up in a time where there were some great performers even slightly before us. Allbaker, his rice bowls, I always thought were the cleverest way to actually do the rice without the actual clear gimmick.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So.
Now, do you see yourself really as more of a magician, a collector, or in particular magic? Do you like doing seances and spooky types of stuff, or do you consider yourself a mentalist, or a little bit of everything, or what?
No, you know what? I'm primarily a magician. You know what? And I don't really do seances or anything like that, but I do like a spooky, type of an element into the
Right.
act. Like I do include a spirit bell or maybe a talking skull or something. I like anything that moves or floats.
Okay.
It really takes your show to a new dimension. Like even a haunted pack of cards, that is very, very powerful. I mean, I can't stress enough how powerful a haunted pack of cards, which is a pack of cards that visibly cuts itself, and the card or cards that were selected, they will be protruding from the pack.
So it
And there's a
sounds
lot.
like you would be a type of guy who would wear one of the loops on your wrist all the time, every day.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, you know what? But I call myself a magician. You know what? And I'm also known as a collector. And I just don't collect Anverdi stuff. I mean, I have a lot of things from Thayer, Owen, P&L. Things that are unusual. I just don't grab anything. But I like something that's out of the ordinary.
Right. Are you interested also because do you have an engineering background, or is it?
You know what? It's strange you should mention that. I am not formally trained in
Mhm.
things of that nature. I actually went to college for business, but I do build a lot of my own props, and I've sold a lot of props worldwide throughout the years. So mine's just through trial and error, through
Oh,
experimentation. So throughout the years, for the last 25 years or so, I've been building things, and I've sold a lot of things worldwide. What was really big about 12, 13, 14 years ago? Flea circuses.
oh,
I don't
sure.
know why, but
Did you
they
make those
were.
too?
Yes, I sold about
Oh man.
150 of them. I got
Okay.
so tired of making these, Scott, that I just said, you know what? I think that's enough. I'm gonna pull the plug.
They were big
Uh,
for a
I
while.
sold I sold all different shapes, sizes, forms. I mean, from handheld little ones in the palm of your hand up to big Foot Locker versions. Some were manual, some were
Yeah.
electronic, and some were like a hybrid between both. But they're very time consuming and everything. But I did very well with them, so I kind of jumped on the wave a little bit.
Now, I know also, I remember years ago having gone into Andre Cole's, I start to say locker area, but his warehouse, I guess, where he had a lot of his things. And he kept a lot of his illusions from year to year, and he would update things as for his new tours. And I remember seeing some things that had just these old, look like uh, television tubes that you would see from old TVs or things that used to.
Mhm.
That's how a lot of electronics worked back in the 70s and perhaps early 80s, but mainly the, I guess, 50s and 60s. I guess when they kind of used those kinds of tubes and things. Did Anverdi use things that were like that had some sort of electronics? I mean, obviously there are new things today with digital technology that since Murphy's taken over and things you're working with them have far surpassed what they used to have. I mean, the ideas are basically there, but it was a lot more difficult to try to come up with those things back then. But I and they could be built much more compactly as well. But did he start off and using that kind of technology basically with the wires and tubes and things?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, you know what, the whole premise of electronics has changed beyond belief. Yeah, back when Inverdi started building these things in the 70s, most of the items were hand wound coils. I mean, it's just wow. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
That's the thing about the Inverdi items, particularly the ones with electronics inside. They're getting so old. It's getting to the point
You can't find the parts.
where you're right. You can't find the parts. Things can't be replaced. So the only option you have really is to tear all that stuff out and to replace it with modern components.
Hmm.
Okay. Now there is an issue with that. That will actually diminish the price of the Anverdi item. It's not
Yeah.
going to be worth as much, obviously. But that's really the only option you have. Now, now you had mentioned the card rises. Those things are notorious for getting out of tune. See, that was another problem. Yeah, there was a tuning issue.
What do you mean by
What
that?
inverting? Well, you know what? If you would push the remote, it just simply wouldn't work, or it would sporadically work. What you'd have to do is go inside both the receiver, inside the playing cards, and the transmitter. There was little potentiometers, little pots. They're like a little round disc, a black disc, maybe about as big as a pea, slightly larger, and
Okay.
there's a white part in the middle with a slot. So you'd have to put a screwdriver in there,
Yeah.
preferably non-metallic, like a plastic screwdriver.
Uh-huh.
So what you'd have to do is you'd have to fine tune those pots to get it back on the frequency. Okay, and like I said, the
Wow.
rising cards were notorious for going out of tune. I mean, they were absolutely beautiful to look at. They were not reliable in like an everyday performance. They would basically work off of channel 27, which is a very common frequency. Most RC cars work off of channels 27 and 49. Okay, and so yeah, so those things would probably have to be replaced if you actually if you would like to use one in actual performance. I would tear out those electronics. If you're not if you know what if you're not worried about the value of them or whatever, it'll actually work much better if you put modern key fob type of things that are encoded.
Is that because of the, you said the common frequency, there may be something else that is conflicting with that could mess it up and keep it from working?
Oh, absolutely. If you're in a
Hmm.
hotel and
That's what I mean.
faxes are running,
Hmm.
even cell phones, I mean, you would be surprised at the interference that that you would get on these things. One guy that I know, he had an Anverdi key box, which worked off of a standard 27 frequency, the megahertz, and and he put $100 in there, and he locked it up, and he had the spectator. There's 7 keys, I believe, and so six spectators would each pick a key, and so the one that so the one that the magician's left with, that would be the one that
That's
opens up.
7 keys to ball pate.
Very similar to it, yeah. It turned out that one of the spectators, when they tried their key, it opened the key box because at that point it picked
Oops.
up some interference. I think there was a plane flying overhead. There was an airplane or something. Yeah,
Wow.
so
I
the guy
guess you
lost
win.
100. Yeah, the guy lost $100, and it kind of made him look like a fool. So yes, that's the drawback to the original Inverdi stuff. I mean, you know what? Like, as long as the electronics still work, I would say keep it, of course. But if it gets to the point where they're just all completely shot, I mean, you really have no other option but to get somebody that knows how to do it and put some modern electronics in there with a key fob type of thing where you push the button. I mean, it'll pick up 300 feet away, 250 feet. You'll be a lot better off, and yet you'll still have the cool looking Anverdi prop because, like I
Hmm.
said, they're actually stunning to look at. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous with the black plexiglass.
Do you think that they were originally sold mainly for professionals to use or for collectors?
Oh, I think they were sold for professionals. Yeah, because
Okay.
you know what, collecting magic is a relatively new term. I mean,
I guess that's true.
if you go back even 40 years ago, 30 years ago, I mean, there were
People
some
weren't collecting
collectors.
so much. Yeah, but not like there are
No,
today. It's
now
true.
it's like, oh my goodness, I belong on Facebook to several different collection
Sure.
places and so forth. And no, it's bigger than and what's strange, Scott, is nowadays people collect anything. I mean, I know people that collect doorknobs,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
board games, GI Joe swatches from the 70s, the old the
Right.
old
I
watches that go
imagine
around
people
your leg.
collect everything, including floss. I mean,
Yeah.
a little bit of everything, I'm sure.
Yeah, you know what? I'm friends with a bunch of collectors, and they got oh my goodness, anything you can imagine. I mean,
Right.
and it's like serious business to them. I mean, like just like others, we would look at my Inverti. That's and who Inverti? What's that?
Well, now, how many things did he make in his lifetime, or he was known for? I named just a few of the things that he had come up with, and I know he had a book on 50 years of Anverdi. Do you know about how many
that is,
things?
yeah, it's a lot. I mean, starting with the liquid slash bottles type of effects. So
Yeah.
he had a multitude of bottles. He had the universal bottle, which was almost like a milk pitcher, but but he'd use a few different chemicals. So when you apparently pour the wine from the bottle into the cone or what have you, when
Hmm.
you stand it back up, the bottle looked empty, but the water is still in there. It's just that the purple, what looked like wine, bleached, and now it's clear again. So you're looking
Oh,
at the bottle and you're looking at the water still in there, and then the cone would be empty. So yeah, he was very clever even with chemicals. And so yes, so that's one. That's called the universal bottle. He had the Wonder Trays, which is the black plexiglass tray that you hold in your hand like a serving tray, and there's 2 glasses on there. And when you pour milk from the pitcher, the one glass that you're pouring into does not fill up, but the other one visibly does.
hmm.
And thanks to a special gimmick he made, you could actually pick this glass up, and no milk will come out of it. And you switch the glasses around. Now that one will deplete, and the other one will visibly rise. It's a very visual effect. But that was called the Wonder Tray. He built about 3 or 4 different versions of this. Now, one was absolutely clear. Plus, there was other ones that had electronic pump inside, a hidden pump. So he built about 3 or 4 of the Wonder Trays. He built a few other bottles, with hidden, like a rubber bulb syringe inside where it would fill a glass up if you put it. Like if you flip the bottle upside down, like there was a little jigger you put on top of it, it would visibly fill up. There's a hidden bulb syringe you squeeze
Hmm.
inside the bottle. I mean, there was a multitude of bottles and trays he started with. That's how he started. And then in the 70s, like I said, he started building quite a few electronic props. Probably 2 of his most famous, I would say, would be the talking skull and the spirit bell. And he built the mental die, like you said, the bolt of lightning, which is a large nut and bolt. It's a fantastic effect. I mean, you could actually thread the nut onto the bolt, and you place it into a plexiglass box, and you show the interior completely empty. When you place it inside and close the lid up, you hand it to a spectator, and that nut is now off the bolt. And
Hmm.
and all things could be examined. I mean, it was a real stunner. He built a voice box, which is probably one of the more complex items. This is even hard to describe. I actually had one in my collection, but I got rid of it a few years ago. It's a little black plexiglass box that's seated on your table. And basically, you ask a spectator to name any number from 1 to 10, and so you pull out a magic marker from your jacket pocket, from your the inside breast pocket, and so you write that down. So let's say they said number 9, you write 9 down, and you ask another spectator to name another number from 1 to 10. And so let's say they say 8, so the number is 98. When you write the 8 next to the 9, you have 98 written. You cap the marker, put it back in your pocket, and when you lift the lid up on the box, it says 98. 98. It'll actually talk to you. I mean, the modus operandi to this is absolutely shocking. I mean, it's probably the most difficult item he built, and so that was the voice box. I'm trying to think of the
Did
other.
he corroborate with other people as well, or were these just ideas of his own, or how did he come up with?
What did you say?
I was asking if he just collaborated with other magicians or electricians or other creative people, or did he just come up with these ideas and build them himself, or
I'll tell you, that's a very good question. I mean, like, I know he was friends with a magician that was in Europe. Jeffries was his last name, and so he did build some electronic stuff. But I think overall, Anverdi, he was pretty much a pioneer. I mean, with microelectronics, and how he come up with this stuff. I mean, really nobody knows. And you know what? And it seems like that he likes spooky stuff too, because like I said, the spirit bell, the spooky coin box, which is a box where you put a $50 on, and what you do is you'd have to ask a spectator to grab it, and they can't do it. The coin would fall down into the box. It was a light sensor, like a photo sensor that worked on the ambient light. So his things did have a spooky type of an element to it. The spooky hand box where you would deal the cards into the box, and there was a hand and would slap the lid down. Just as you're about to deal one of the cards, and that card that you're about to deal would be the selected one, which is very similar to the barking dog effect, where the dog would start to bark.
Do you know whether he started building these things for himself for performing, or did he always have this as an idea of saying, I'm just going to build a bunch of these things, if people like it, I'm going to start selling them? I'm just curious if he really was a performer as good as he was an inventor.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said. I think he was actually performing some of these things. Like you mentioned, he performed at different things in Switzerland and so forth. And so, he actually performed a form of his color match on stage, which is the magic markers, where a spectator would pick up a colored magic marker, and they would color in part of a pie graph. And then so he'd pick up a marker from across the room and color it in. The spectator would pick another one up. So what the bottom line is once they're all done drawing, they would show each of the drawings, and the pie graphs were actually colored in exactly alike, hence the name, a color match. But he actually performed that effect for the Library of Congress out there. It's just that he used a more basic method, where the one he sold to customers was a much refined item, where it was a 6-channel transmitter built into the actual tablet itself, the actual pad, so so I think he started off actually building these things for himself, and then he figured, well, why not sell these? So from Holland, which is where he was from, he started constructing these things, and so he started selling these things worldwide. I think the rising cards is the most plentiful. I think the jumbo rising cards, he made about 750 of these. So just to give you an idea how many he made, and he sold them worldwide.
That's quite a few when you stop to think that each one was handmade. These were not manufactured in China or something.
Yeah, there was no assembly line. He didn't have anybody working for him. From my understanding, he was in his attic. He had a nice little workshop up in his attic, and so that's where he would create his things, and they're powerful effects. I mean, like I said, which I still use the Anverdi talking skull all the time. I mean, like, if I really want to impress a close-up group, I'll bring it with me.
What's the size of the skull? Is it about the size of a human skull, or is it more the size of your fist?
Well, he made a few life-size ones, very few of them. He made about 3 or 4 of the life-size ones. No, but the talking skull of his is about as big as a silver dollar.
Oh, it's very small.
It's a pure close-up effect. It's mounted on a clear plexiglass backboard.
Yeah, can you go ahead and explain the effect on that as well too? people who don't
Yeah,
know.
what this is for your listening audiences out here is it's a small skull that's mounted on a clear backboard, and the whole thing is mounted on a black plexiglass base. Okay, but the jaw of the skull is up. What it's not actually touching the black base. It's probably an inch or so up
Right.
above the base. And so what basically happens is you would have a card selected and you would show it to the audience. You'd place it back in the pack, shuffle it in. And so you would uncover the skull and say, would you like to help me find this card? And the jaw would clack, once for yes, twice for no, or what have you. And then so you would, so you'd start naming cards. Was it an ace? Was it a 2, 3, 4? So when it hits on the card, the jaw would clack again. Okay, was it a red card? Clack. Okay, good. Was it a diamond? Was it was it a heart? Clack, clack. So yes, it would actually discern like a playing card or what have you. And this thing was under your control at all times. And it's a very visual effect, which I still use to this day for close-up venues, like I said. And I don't know exactly who's listening to this podcast. I don't know how deep I should get in to the mechanics of this.
Well, the magicians, this is really 99.9% of the people are magicians, but of different backgrounds and interests. They all have an interest in this. There really aren't many, if any, non-magicians, I think, who listen. Those who are might be spouses or partners and friends, of magicians. So I think it'd be fine to go into some detail.
Okay, yeah, because the way I have mine hooked up, Scott, the transmitter is a single push button type of a thing. And what I did was I actually went into there and I hooked up a toe switch.
That's what I was going to say, because you can't be pushing something with your fingers. There's looking in your hands. So it's got to be like a toe switch. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? You want to keep this as clean as possible.
Or an ankle switch or something. Yeah.
Right. So what I've done was actually hooked it up to a toe switch, and it's a pressure switch, and I have it mounted on like the insole of a shoe that goes inside your shoe. And so it's basically my big toe is the part that moves and it pushes the button. Okay. Sure. And the shoes have to be a little loose. I mean, if you ever seen Del Rey, his shoes were never tied.
Well, I never looked under the table to notice.
Yeah, his shoes were never tied, and they were bigger shoes than he normally wore because he used bilateral toe switches where his toe would hit a button going up and going down.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh, he was loaded with, oh my goodness, he was loaded with toe switches, and it switched the frequencies too. You know what? Because he would work each of the items from the same toe switches, but he'd switch the frequencies. So that's the thing that was amazing about it.
I guess he'd have to, because sure, they couldn't all be on the same frequency. You want everything going off. You know what? You don't want Willie going up the ladder too soon or any of that.
Yeah, right. Hey, but don't feel bad for anybody out there that gets electronic effect and it doesn't quite work right. Have an out. I mean, that's the best thing I could suggest to you. Okay, if you're performing any type of a card rise, whether it's a Divano type or whatever, if the card doesn't rise, have that force card, taped to the bottom of your top hat, something, just so you can say, "Oh, here it is." Okay,
there must be an out.
That's the thing I stress to a lot of people, okay, which they tend to overlook. It's very important to have an out, or you will look like a fool.
Well, that gets me to the point I was going to talk about mentalism in general, where it seems, as I have been attending, let's say, Mindvention and other mentalism conventions, or just regular conventions, where more and more things are being sold to the mentalists that are really high tech. Because the mentalist used to walk out just with a clipboard, basically, let's say, or like in the case of Kreskin, just with doing a linking finger ring, and that'd be basically all that he would ever use as far as the rest of the show, not really have anything that looked like props. Today, you could still look like you're not using any props, but you could still be loaded to the hilt, basically, I guess, with toe switches and pocket transmitters and everything else as well. And those are going to be very, very expensive, but they can be concealed so much easier.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? Even if you watch America's Got Talent, I mean, there's a lot of mentalists that use spirit bells. You know what? The actual spirit bell itself, I mean, like they're almost all electronic nowadays, and they're all made with different types of wood bases to make it look antique and so forth and everything. But you know what? But the point I'm trying to make, it's important to have some type of an out. I mean, like, just in case for some reason your bell doesn't ring, just, I mean, like, even to say, I guess the spirits aren't quite with us with the bell tonight. Let's move on to something else. You got to have some type of an out. You know what I mean?
You can't have that as your closer if it's not working, or the thread breaks or something. It's like, All right. Good night, folks. Drive safe.
But that's exactly true. Yeah, mentalism has gone high tech. I think it's going to go higher, and it's getting smaller, like you said. What the Murphy's company has done a beautiful job with the new Anverdi dice. I mean, these are as small as the kinds that you would find like in a Yahtzee game or something, and yet it holds the electronics. Whereas the original Anverdi die is about a 3 by 3 inch cube. Okay, so that shows how small these things have gotten. And it's like to the point where they're so small that people would have no reason to suspect them. It's like, oh, these just came from, whatever, from my Yahtzee game that I had put in the closet. It looks totally normal. And yet they hold the electronics in there. So, yeah, things have gotten. I think it's going to get to the point, Scott, where holograms are going to be used. I mean, if I was to make a prediction, I would say holograms are the wave of the future. It's going to get to the point where you're going to be looking at something on stage and you think you see something and it isn't even there, which is a cool concept.
Well, that's true. And speaking of digital things, I know, again, as we have been discussing about Murphy, that they've had the rights to the Anverdi products since 2010, but I assume that they probably weren't making a lot of things with that until they kind of started working with you or somebody then to kind of help develop some of these products and how that they could move from the old technology to the newer digital technology.
Right, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, you'd have to talk to them for actual specifics, but what I assume, is they had to find the right people that can make these things.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so they supply them with an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and so they kind of got me because, like, I have the largest Anverdi collection in the world. They got me as like a spokesman, which is kind of cool. They actually flew up from California to Pittsburgh, which is about a 3,000-mile trip, and so
Mm-hmm.
we set up in the back of a restaurant, and so we just filmed a lot of my Anverdi stuff, and it was really cool. And so they made a nice little video and so forth. And you know what, they're doing a great job, and they're doing a fantastic job. And I'm still friends with Patrick Wolford, which is one of the main designers and so forth. And yeah, they seem like a very nice company, and they put out quality stuff, which is important.
Yeah, they really do. And speaking of quality things, I know that Craig Filicetti with Pro Mystic also puts together just fantastic stuff that rivals, I think, where Anverdi was back then. I mean, he's on the leading edge of technology for so many things that are out there and it's available right now.
Absolutely. I actually have a few of Craig's item. I mean, his components are so small
Mm-hmm.
in a few of his effects that you can't even really see them. You have to hold it with tweezers, and you have to look through like a almost like a lens. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. I mean, like I said, I actually perform a few of his effects, and I would highly recommend his items. Definitely.
Yes, I know some of the things are actually baked into the thing, so you can't even get to it.
Right, exactly.
They're basically in there. If you're going to replace the item, you have to replace the whole item, not just the thing that's in it.
Right. Probably the main thing I would stress also, Scott, if anybody gets any electronic magic effects, okay, unless it comes with a rechargeable battery inside, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's nothing you could do. But if it does take regular batteries, okay, always use the alkaline batteries, okay, and always make sure they're brand new. I mean, I change my batteries every performance. I probably spend about $700 a year just on batteries, just to give you an example.
Good idea. You can't be left with something not working.
You know what? As long as you do your best, and as long as you try your best, and if you change the batteries and something doesn't go your way, at least it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would stress is to take the batteries out when you're done performing. I've seen this happen. I could not tell you how many times people leave their batteries in, and what's going to happen, sometimes it takes longer, but quite often it's a short time. They'll corrode, and they'll actually ruin the whole PC board.
That's
so
true.
Take those batteries out, pop those suckers out. You know what? I even seen people with their Halloween toys for Halloween decorations. They go, "Oh, I forgot to take the batteries out, and it's ruined." So it doesn't matter if it's a magic effect or if it's a toy, your grandson's toy. Take the batteries out when you're not using these things. It's very, very important.
Now, you say use alkaline batteries. What are the other batteries not to use?
Heavy duty. Keep away from heavy duty. I mean, that they just don't have the punch. And you know what? Like, I don't know if I can name brands.
Sure.
Or what,
I was going to say, is there a name brand that you would even recommend?
Okay. Yeah. Duracell's the best.
Duracell's. Okay.
Yeah. I've tried every battery known to man, and and Duracell has the kick. Okay, so always use Duracell if it's possible. The Energizers are close. But Duracell has the kick. You know what? So but even so, they're expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
they're very expensive and they're going up. But I change my batteries every performance, and I keep the ones that I have taken out for like things that I'm experimenting with and I'm building and so forth. Probably one of the best things you're gonna probably own would be like a voltmeter. Go online or go to your local place where they sell things and buy a voltmeter so you can test your batteries.
Right.
If you're gonna perform with a 9-volt battery and it's coming up, 6.3, do not use it. If it's like 8.8 plus, well, that's great. But yeah, always test your batteries, check them. It's very simple. You know what I mean? And so
I
I
think
would
it's a good
highly
idea
recommend.
to test them, even if they are relatively new. In other words, you take them out of the pack. Sometimes they might
Oh,
be on
absolutely.
the shelf for too long, and you think, okay, they're new.
Absolutely.
I just bought them at CVS or Walgreens or something, and when
That's
you
a
take
very
them
good.
out, then it's not working. They could
You
have been
know
on the
what?
shelf too long.
That's a very good point. And things like that have happened to me. Yeah.
Hmm.
Always try to buy your batteries like at a bigger place like Walmart where they have a big turnaround. But yeah, I've actually had that happen where I bought a new pack and I was all set for a performance and I tested it. And I said, oh no, this isn't where it should be. So I had to scramble with the batteries I had. I kept testing them and I find something that would work. But yeah,
So
always keep your batteries fresh. And like I knew a couple people that had electronic devices and they tried to get through like 10 performances with the same batteries. Don't do that.
right. I know also it's important sometimes you need to plug in something. So I have in my contract not only to be near a plug, but also be near a working plug. If I'm working in a banquet room or hotel, casino,
Yeah.
or a country club or something like that, I want to make sure it's a working plug because sometimes they got plugs that don't work or whatever. But beyond that, I want to make sure that I have an extension cord that I carry with me that will be long enough to connect to whatever I'm going to use.
Absolutely. I have things charging all the time. Matter of fact, for bigger shows, I bring a PA system with me, and the whole thing is battery operated, which is really cool. So you don't have to run any wires anywhere. And
Mhm.
yeah, so quite often, like particularly, like if I'm doing like, maybe 2 shows a day, while I'm setting up the second show, I have this plugged in and it's charging. You know what I mean? And yeah, so like if you could do your whole show on battery, I mean, I think it's much better than going AC because 30 years ago I used to run extension cords across the whole room. I'd duct tape it to the floor to make sure nobody would trip or anything. But yeah, so that is important to have a working outlet where you can charge things, and so forth. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that is very important. Well, as far as some of the recommended things that are really collectible Anverdi things, what would you say would be the most collectible thing that you have, or perhaps the most important piece in your collection?
Well, you know what, as far as Anverdi goes, I kind of like the floating cube. Like I said, it's
Oh yeah,
it's
inside the
it's
tube. I mean,
amazing.
the die inside the tube thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it just has such a neat effect, and it is collectible. I think the barking dog is highly collectible, which there's two different
Explain the
versions.
barking dog.
Yeah, the barking dog is a fantastic effect. It's a cute little dog toy that's sitting on a black plexiglass base and has green felt on the base. And so pretty much what you do is you have a person freely select a card. This card is not forced,
Hmm.
and it's placed back in the pack. You swing cut it and so forth. You could shuffle it, and you can have a spectator take the cards at this point, and they deal them down onto the base up in front of the dog. And one by one, they would start dealing it, and they'd pause about a half a second, and all of a sudden the dog starts to bark.
Hmm.
He really goes crazy. He goes, yep, 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 bark, 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 bark. Yeah. And the very next card that they're about to deal, that's the selected card in their hand. So it's an amazing effect, and there's actually two versions of the barking dog. One is where you deal them down onto the pedestal, and the other version is where once the card is selected, you shuffle back in a pack, you lay the pack onto the pedestal, and either you or a spectator remove the cards one by one. And so once they're removing the cards, the dog starts barking,
Hmm.
and so the very next card that you were about to remove, that's the selected playing card. So there's actually two different versions. Like I said, one's you're dealing onto the pedestal, the other one is you're taking off.
Gotcha.
But,
Hmm.
but yeah, the barking dog is a very collectible item. It's a cute effect. Cuteness, I would say, goes to the dog. People love any kind of little toys, little dogs, and so forth. But yeah, but I'd say collectible wise, I'd say the floating cube. If you do have a voice box or you're able to get a voice box, it probably will not work anymore,
Hmm.
sadly, because electronics are so old. That is such a difficult item. I don't even know if an electronic engineer would be able to get this working properly with modern electronics, because what Anverdi did was he converted the radio waves
Wow.
into a voice chip. I mean, and for like from 1985 or something like that, that was really unheard of. I mean, that was probably the most amazing feat. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You know what? If you have a voice box, that's why I kind of got rid of mine years ago. I said
Right.
this is an accident waiting to happen. And I will not be able to fix it.
Right.
I'm first to admit.
Are there some of the actual props that you still own that are collectible that are in your show today, or do you keep those things back and then use the newer things like the Murphy cells?
Yeah, I still use the Anverdi talking skull for close up. I use
Hmm.
the floating die for stage shows. It's such a great effect. I do use the Murphy's dice for close up. As yeah, they have this thing. It is so good. I mean, they have two different versions. One has the three dice, the red, white, and blue
Right.
dice, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is either a white die or a black die. The three colored dice have a prompter, which is a visual cue, whereas the white die or the
As a
black
thumper.
die is a thumper.
I
Is
have one
correct.
of those myself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're very reliable. I mean, I've actually used it, quite a few times, and it goes over very well. I mean, if you really
It is.
act with this, see, that's the thing about it, Scott. I mean, when something works real well, okay, well then that's your chance to be an actor. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think I'm picking up something. Yeah, yeah. Let me think about, right. So you can really ham it up.
I remember that Paul Vikiel used to open up his show when he worked at the King's Court or King's Tattoo Parlor at Caesars or wherever it was there in Vegas. And I was with a
Yeah.
friend of mine who was a non-magician who was visiting in California, and he was telling me afterwards of all the things that Paul did. He was impressed with everything, but he said that thing he did with the die to begin with, he
Mhm,
just
mhm,
because he made a whole routine, a memorable routine out of just that
mhm,
opener.
mhm.
That basically, if you throw the die and he predicts what the number is, a number of
Oh,
times. Of course,
oh man.
it's all in the performance, and Paul is just an amazing performer, of course.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
but
Yeah.
but that but if you combine your performance abilities with some good digital or technology that you can incorporate then as well, you do create some miracles.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that the die are never touched by you, the performer, I
Right.
mean, that really puts it to a whole new level, which is important. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because you're not looking at a peaking device or something, you know what I mean? So
Right.
that really puts it to the next level, which is another important factor with me. I kind of like, I kind of like the stuff where I don't touch anything, where the spectator does the work.
Sure.
Uh, I think it's much more powerful, you know what I mean? And the dice effects, yes, that's exactly what they are.
Yeah. Well, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing a lot about Anverdi that I didn't know, and I think some of the listeners also are kind of interested in knowing that as well. If people want to find things and collect things, can they just find them? Where do they go to to buy something? I mean, since there are so few things that are available.
Yeah, you know what? If you're looking for anything, possibly Anverdi or like any kind of collectible items, magic effects, there are a few places you can go. Hocus Pocus down in Fresno, California. If you go online, hocuspocus.com.
Hmm.
Paul Gross is the owner. You know what? Yeah, he's a friend of mine, so make sure you mention my name. If you're looking for the manuscript of the Great Leon Haunted House, a very good friend of mine owns houseoftheunusual.com. That's houseoftheunusual.com.
Uh-huh.
These are available through him, and actually build one of these things. I mean, they're not so difficult to do, or if you know somebody that can maybe alter a dollhouse or something, go ahead and do it. But if you're looking for collectible magic, yeah, Hocus Pocus is good. Go online on Facebook and just punch in antique magic props, or what have you.
Right.
There's different places. Matter of fact, I actually started two of them myself. One is antique and collectible magic on Facebook, and the other one is electronic and mechanical magic. So those are actually my sites on there. So
Okay.
if you ever have any questions or anything, to anybody out there, I get emails almost every day about Anverdi. So feel free to contact
Where
me.
can they contact you?
You can contact me, probably the best way is direct, oldtimemagic@yahoo.com.
That's easy enough.
Okay.
Also, and I imagine
Yep.
Potter and Potter through many of their auctions, they will
Yeah,
probably
you know what? If you
release.
want to go, absolutely. If you want to go through an auction, you know what? By all means, I mean, these guys are great guys to put this stuff together, and it's and they're very honest about it. You know, always deal with somebody reputable who's going to be honest about things, because you don't want to buy something that doesn't work and it is advertised as working, obviously, because it's going to lead to a lot of trouble.
Are there any problems also, one last question over here, with being ripped off by something that is not original? In other words, I know if like with artwork, sometimes you may think you're getting an original Picasso, but it was not, or something. Are there ways of knowing whether this was an Anverdi or not?
You know what? It
Did
would
he have a
be
stamp or
difficult.
something, or etched,
No, there
etching?
were, well, yeah, I mean, he did have a couple stickers he used once in a while. It's an Anverdi, but that could be copied. You know what? His style is really hard to copy. And you know what? If it's an original, components, like I said, the pots, the actual the actual potentiometers are very unusual.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? I could tell immediately if it is a real one or not. So like if you have a question, what you can do is snap a photograph and just put it to my email. I will be glad to look at it for you.
Okay.
But from what I've seen, I don't see anybody really copying Anverdi stuff and saying it is, that it's his. It would be difficult to actually, to actually try to do that.
Okay. Well, I wondered if that was an issue you had to worry about or not. Well, we start to wrap up then over here. Of course, I always like to ask my guests of what their magic word is. That's your philosophy of life. What is it you care about? Or obviously your passion would be over here with Anverdi. But is there something that you could recommend or something that you live by?
Yeah, you know what? To anybody who's a serious performer or a serious collector, just always do your best. Be honest. Make sure you give everybody a fair shake. You know what? Keep it humble. You know what? Don't be arrogant about whatever you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Always be thankful. That's probably my motto.
Always be thankful. I love that. That's great. For those people, by the way, who are watching this on YouTube, we're going to have a little bonus effect here after we say goodbye to the audio portion of this. After Chuck signs off here, we're going to continue this for a little bit longer, and I'm going to record the video. So if you are listening to this, I recommend that you go over to the website at themagicwordpodcast.com, and you can click on the video and you can watch this on the end, or you can go to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Texas Magician, and you can see the video that is going to show Chuck demonstrating some of these things then as well. Plus, of course, there'll be some other video we'll have. Did Anverdi have some video of his own, by the way? That
you know what? Very scarce.
Okay, I didn't know if there was something on YouTube that we could find.
No, I did manage to find one clip about a year ago. After all these years, he was performing at a stage show somewhere in Holland, and he performed his Wonder Tray with a liquid, and literally about a 60-second performance. So that's out there if you dig deep enough, but that's it.
Okay, I thought that probably was going to be the case. All right, and so and I appreciate that very much, Chuck. Appreciate you talking with us here today. And so until next time, that was Chuck Caputo. This is Scotty out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now for you lucky folks who are watching this on YouTube, going to get a little bit of a bonus effect by getting to see Chuck perform some of the things from his collection, the Anverdi collection. So I'm really looking forward to this, Chuck. What have you got for us? What are you going to show us?
Okay. Hey, first of all, thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure coming on. And I'd
bet.
like to say hello to all the listening audience, now the viewing audience.
The viewing audience.
What I had mentioned during the podcast is probably the two more popular the Anverdi items is the spirit bell, which is right here, and I hope you guys can see that okay, and the talking skull.
Okay.
Now, I'm gonna demonstrate exactly how these can be used. Now, the way I always do it is I would have a pack of cards, and you can show them. They're all different. Give them a shuffle. And at this point, I could pull out a card, and it doesn't matter which one. We'll show it. I'll close my eyes. We'll show it to the viewing audience.
Okay.
Okay. And okay, but I don't want the skull to see it, or I'm going to hide it from the bell also. So we're going to place it into the pack. All right. Now we're going to start. This bell comes from a haunted house. Okay. Now I picked it up many years ago, and it's supposed to have a spirit attached. Will you help me find the playing card, please? Oh, look at that. We're going to start low. Was it an ace? Was it a 2, a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, It was a 9. Okay, we're off to a good start. Was it a black card? How about a red card? Very good. Was it a diamond? It was a 9 of diamonds. So that is the Anverdi spirit bell. And what's cool about this, if you do have one of these, or if you plan on getting one somewhere, the bell can be examined. You could remove the striker. It can be examined as well.
Uh-huh.
It's a fantastic effect, and it is black plexiglass, which most of his items are, and it has a couple 4 feet on the bottom, like 4 unscrewable feet. But it's a really nice effect. So that's the spirit bell. Now that's something that I use on stage and close up. Now this I use pretty much just for close up because of its small size. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'll put a little closer so your viewing audience can see this.
Wow, with the hands and everything there.
Yeah,
Are those mirrors?
like
Or that's not a mirror. Those are plexiglass. Oh, okay, I see now. Mm-hmm.
right. It's a plexiglass trifold screen type of thing, and he's suspended. Like I said, his jaw's actually suspended.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so yeah, I mean, like basically the same premise. I mean, any type of a discernment, but I kind of like to do the card effect or whatever. I'll just pop another card out, and we'll show it to you guys.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll place it back inside. And so what I'd basically do is just pull the cloth off, and I'd say, "This is the great Skeletini. He's been with me for many years. Skeletini, would you help me find the playing card, please?" Look at that. He says yes. All right. We're going to start low. Concentrate if you would. Okay. I'm going through the pages of your mind. Blank pages. Here we go. Was it an ace? Was it a 2? It was a 2. Wow. Cool. Was it a black card? How about a red card? Was it a diamond? It was the 2 of diamonds. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Anverdi skull. And like I said, it's a beautiful effect. This is the first Anverdi prop that I got, like I said on the podcast.
Yeah.
Probably 37 years ago. And it still works. It still has the original electronics inside. It's a fantastic effect. I mean, I use this at a lot of my close-up venues.
Is that something that you can replace some portion of that if it happens to break? I mean, is it, or when it's gone, it's gone?
Nowadays, because the components are difficult to find, when it's gone, it's gone. So
Okay,
you're going to have to actually go inside this thing, and you're going to have to pry out all the electronics and replace it with modern electronics.
Gotcha.
And the on-off switches on the bottom, here. Okay, so it's like a type of a feel thing.
So are both of those sold by Murphy's at all today?
Not right now, but I believe it's in the pipeline.
Okay.
I think a Spirit Bell and the Anverdi skull is in the pipeline, and I'd be curious to see what they come up with, because the skull is just absolutely phenomenal.
It is cool looking.
It really is a cool looking skull, and it freaks people out, Scott. I mean, oh my goodness. Now, I had mentioned the Anverdi. Let me make room. I hope you can still hear me okay.
Sure.
I had mentioned the Anverdi die.
Yes.
Okay, now this is the original Anverdi die. Okay, this is such an important piece of magic history, because you will probably never see one of these in working order again. Okay, this is the original one, and it's all original electronics inside.
How many of those did he make?
Not too many. I mean, if I had to put a number, maybe 20 of them.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a separate unit. Now, he also built them where it's like in a close-up case also, but this particular version, maybe about 20 of them. Now, if I was to put this into the box, and I could see it's a 5. Now look, I'm going to put it in without even looking, and I'll close it up, and I'm picking up number 1. Okay. And I don't know exactly how much in detail I should go here, but since you said that most of the people are magicians here,
yeah,
this is the original receiver, and I'm going to hold this up to you.
Okay.
I mean, it'll blow your mind when I open this thing up, Scott. This thing is all hand wound coils.
Holy moly! Yeah.
Okay, all original, 1976, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds 2 1.5 size end batteries. Okay, there's the on-off switch. Okay, and there's a couple tuners here. There's a potentiometer. There's a tuner.
So do you have to take a plastic screwdriver and
change
that every once in a while? Yeah.
Yep. Now, if you look on this version, there's holes numbered 1 to 5. That's the LEDs, and he was a pioneer. LEDs weren't even heard of in the early 70s, and he actually made this from LEDs.
That is amazing.
Now, here's the die itself. It's about a 2.5 inch square, I'm going to put this right here. Let me see if I can prop this up a little bit. I hope you guys can see this okay. Let me fold this up a little bit. And you know what? I kind of like to use spooky looking cloth also.
Yeah.
Look, this has a skull on it, but I'm going to prop this up a little bit so your viewing audience can see this.
Okay.
And when I put the die into the box, now we're going to put the two side up, the two spot. Okay.
So it's
there
not
should be
activated until you actually put it in the box.
exactly. There's a matching LED
Yeah, I see
in
that.
the two slot. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is tuned pretty good. I just tuned it not too long ago. So number 4, we'll place it in. It'll go number 4.
So
Okay.
it looks like it triggers something as you drop it in, and that's whenever it tells what the number is.
What it is, Scott, is each of the sides of this die has a reed switch.
Yeah.
Which is, which to the viewing audience that might not know what that is, it's a really cool switch. It's 2 pieces of wire that's hermetically sealed in a tube, and when a magnet goes near it, it'll close and complete the circuit.
Close the circuit, right?
So there's a magnet in the bottom of the box. Okay, so when you put it in, it'll throw a signal to the actual receiver, which it should be number 1 now. Okay, if you're not picking up anything because it's only numbered 1 to 5,
Then it'd be 6.
if you're not picking anything up, yeah, then it's either a 6
Or they're messing with you.
or somebody's messing with you and they didn't put anything in.
Yeah.
And that has happened. Okay, but I'm going to show you how to get into this die. You will not believe this. If you can pass this for examination,
Yeah.
and they'll never note anything. It's always the way Anverdi made them. It's the 1 spot.
Okay.
You're going to get your thumb and you're going to rotate it.
Oh, and unscrew it almost with your thumb on the 1.
Right. That's a screw. That's a screw with a white
doggone.
head on it.
Wow.
And you're gonna take this out.
Yeah.
I'll hold that close.
Got it.
And this pops off. The whole lid pops off. What you're left with, here's the 9-volt battery, and there's all the electronics.
That 1 9-volt's all that you need for the whole thing?
1 9-volt is all you need. Inside, I'm going to show you the pots down the bottom. There's these little white tuners.
I see that.
And
yep.
That's where you insert the screwdriver head, because like it might be picking up a false reading. So every once in a while that will happen.
Wow.
So you're gonna snap the battery off. All right, and then here's the little piece of foam that I put in here because you don't want the battery to make noise. Sometimes it'll shift, so you want to make it as tight as possible when the battery's in here. You're going to replace this, and you're going to put the little screw. Now you don't want to cross strip this. You have to be very careful. You want to go backwards first, then forward. All right. And it's built so well that nobody ever detected anything.
I would not have thought about that. That's just brilliant.
And here, like I said, here's the original receiver. Here's the on-off switch. We'll turn that off.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put this back inside of here. Now, Anverdi, like you said, he's written a few books, and I'll show you. There you go. The bell's still ringing. Okay. Let me clear this off of here, Scott. Anverdi, oh, here's his picture, first of all. He performed as a European clown. And you don't see clowns look like this in America too much, or in the Western part of the world.
No.
But he was a clown, actually. Well, what he was a baker. He actually started off as a baker, and then he did a little clown show on the side. I tell you what, he must have been a hell of a clown because he had some amazing stuff, you know. But here's another picture of the clown.
Okay.
I mean, really cool getup. And here's another one, which is signed by Anverdi. Okay.
Could you send copies of that to me, just some JPEGs that I can put on the website too?
Yeah, I could do that. Sure.
Yeah.
That'll be no problem. I will definitely do that for you. And here is one of his catalogs, which he would mail out all across the world. You know what? These are left blank as far as the prices go, but you know, he would fill in the different prices and all different effects. Here's the front cover. I'll show you this portion here.
Wow.
Okay.
These are only available through him. They really weren't sold, let's say, through Stevens Emporium or anything like that, I guess, at the time.
Well, no, actually, like a little bit later on, yeah, he had an importer. He had Howie Schwartzman import some of the stuff. And so, yeah, Howie did put them out through, Stevens did carry some of their stuff.
Okay.
And a few other ones too. I think Hank Lee carried the surprise box, which is the one with the closing lid. And then when he revoked the rights from Howie Schwartzman for whatever reason, Jerry Castle, which he was a good friend of mine. He passed away about 10 years. He was a very good man.
I didn't know him.
He was the importer of the Anverdi stuff, you know. So yeah, so you know what, to help him out here, like here in America, he did have a few people, you know, like I said, Jerry Castle, Howie Schwartzman. So he would actually help import some of these things. Here's an interesting item here. His walking table, which I have one of these. It was really cool. I don't know how good you can see that or not, but it was an actual table similar to Del Rey's, but not nearly as complex. And what you do is on stage, like you would gesture toward it, and it would walk across the table, would bring your top hat to you. And it was a 2-channel type of a thing, so it'll walk back as well. Yeah.
Don Weiberg had one of those in Chicago. He was showing me, but it didn't work. I think he'd fiddled with it as much as he could, and he finally got rid of it. But he had it for the longest time and didn't do anything.
Yeah, those things were notorious for getting out of tune again. I mean, like the table would take off across the stage for no reason. Yeah, yeah. So you'd have to rip out all the electronics and put all new electronics. You know, it was a beautiful table. They came in black plexiglass and red plexiglass. I think I've even seen a blue one, but they were absolutely stunning. Oh my goodness, they were beautiful. He had a couple lecture notes. Let's see. This is number 2 lecture notes. And what a lot of people don't realize also, which I forgot to mention during the podcast, is he just didn't do liquid magic / electronic magic. He did a lot of things with scarves and silks and rings that were very, very clever. Oh my goodness, he was fantastic. If you look me up on YouTube under my wife's name, Sherry Caputo, Cheri, I'm actually performing a few of his ideas. Just search under Sherry, or just punch under the heading of Anverdi Magic. I'm actually demonstrating a few of these really cool ideas he had. Actually, very, very, very advanced, for that time. We're talking 1964. And so it explains a lot of his silk magic effects. It explains a lot of his liquid effects.
Was he an artist as well? Was he a graphic artist and drew these pictures himself, or do you know?
I'm starting to wonder, because I have a few handwritten directions from him.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely, the drawings on there with the hands and so forth. I mean, like, I actually went to art school for a while myself. Hands are very difficult to draw, and the hand drawings that he has on his hand-drawn directions are absolutely beautiful. So I'm starting to wonder. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I mean, but I think he did have the capability to be quite an artist. This is really unusual. This seems to be a lecture note, but it's totally different. I haven't really seen one of these before. It looks much older. The paper is really starting to fray a little bit. But the first 2 are still available. If you do check on used magic lists, these are still available. I think they pop up on eBay once in a while, and they're really not that much, maybe like 20, 25 bucks a piece. I mean, I'd recommend getting these things. So he wrote lecture notes. He wrote Miracles with Liquids in 1964, I believe, which is a really cool book. And it explains a lot of his liquid effects. One called the Sigawee, which is really cool. It's a visual color change, and there's no pulls involved with it. Your hands are, I mean, it's a stunning effect. But yeah, it shows the different bottles. Like I said, the universal bottle, the crazy bottle, the long neck bottle. There's a lot of different things in here. His trays were absolutely phenomenal. I mean, at that time, there was no laser technology to help cut these things. He did it, basically a little jigsaw or like a coping saw.
Wow.
I mean, the things that he did with what he had was really unbelievable. I think in 1992, I would say 92. I mean, I'm not sure about the year, but this was his big book, 50 Years of Magic Creation. And these are still available as well. It's a really neat hardback.
Who published that? Do you know?
I think it was him. I think it was him from Holland. Let me see here. 1992. Oh, Mephisto.
Oh, Mephisto. Okay.
Mephisto Weiss from Belgium. But yeah, it tells a lot of. It even gives the schematics. Okay, with if you can find the parts. I mean, that's a whole different ball game. Personally, what I would do is buy the key fob transmitter and the matching, the matching receiver.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the liquid magic as well. Look, I have notes in here, and it's just amazing. I mean, I think I paid $50 for this when I bought this in '92. I think they're about $250, $300 now. I mean, just to give you an idea how his stuff is going up. And finally, over here, Scott, I have he appeared in the Genie magazine, and so there's a little article on him. This is probably from the mid 60s, I would assume.
Was it 60s? Okay.
Yeah, he was a very thin man, as you can see, a very,
Yes.
very, very thin man. Now, to help house some of these things, I'd recommend either building or buying some type of a case. Here's a little box I built years ago. What I could work with plexiglass as well. It's not that difficult to do. The hardest part is gluing these things because it takes a special glue. This I built for the talking skull because it's important. It's important to protect your investment. So
Of course.
what I do is I get a piece of foam sponge and I put it under his jaw, because if he takes a sudden jolt in transporting, that's not good, because the jaw might snap. There's a little weak spring that
Don't want that to happen. Sure, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, so I place it inside here. I've lined it with green felt.
Yeah.
And I'd help actually put some napkins back here to really keep it firm. And you could put a little toothpick in here, what have you.
It's a good idea. How to care for your props.
Yeah, you know what? That's another subject. But yeah, I think it's very important to actually have some type of a case to carry these in, and so forth. So I built that a while back. And probably the most important thing, if you're into any electronic magic at all, whether it be Anverdi, whether it be any kind at all, is here's your voltmeter.
We were talking about it earlier, yes.
Yeah, very, very important. I mean, very simply, you turn it, to your testing.
For your batteries.
And I have a battery right up here. Here we have door cell. So red goes to the little one, which is positive, and then the negative over here. Now this battery is coming up 8.1.
So that's a little bit lower than what you want?
Yeah. Would I actually use this in a performance? Probably not. I mean, it would be kind of shaky. You know what? You're not going to get your best capability out of it. I mean, like you want it to be, like at least 8.8, 8.9. If you buy a brand new 9-volt, particularly door cell, these things are even like 9.2. I mean, and that's how much juice they have in them. Okay. The other thing you're going to need if you're going to have the Anverdi stuff is some type of small screwdrivers. Now, these are regular ones. They have a metal tip. Probably not recommended. I mean, like if I was in a pinch, I could get away with, with fine tuning. But what you want, like I said, is the kind that an old TV repairman had. They were plastic.
Hard plastic, right?
Yeah. But so these coming in for the Anverdi stuff also, but that's pretty much what I got, Scott. I certainly appreciate you having me on, and I hope you folks out there.
Could I spring a surprise on you and ask, do you happen to have that floating die?
I do not have it hooked up. I wish I did.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right.
I would. Hey, let's keep that for another podcast. Get me on again. I'll be glad to show you.
I was going to say there was one video that you had sent me where your wife, Sherry, had recorded, and you were performing that. Could I use that video then also to put on the blog? Okay.
Anything I have, you feel free to use in whatever form you want. Okay.
That sounds great, Chuck. Thanks very much again. And for the rest of you guys who have been watching this, I hope you've enjoyed this little bonus we've had. Compliments of my friend right there, Chuck Caputo. Thanks, Chuck.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
That was Scotty out. Thank you, Chuck. That was great. I appreciate you being our guest this week and for telling us and showing us a lot about Anverdi. I knew very little about him prior to our conversation, so thank you for sharing. I think everyone who was watching and listening to this has certainly learned a lot then as well. Well, speaking of some people from the past, like Anverdi, Lewis Jones was the one who had written Seventh Heaven. Well, it's being republished, or has been republished, by Charlie Randall, and he has offered us 6 copies of that book that we can give away as gifts here on the Magic Word Podcast. So if you will go to themagicwordpodcast.com, and on this week's episode, it's going to be a contest for an opportunity for you to win one of 6 physical copies. This contest has been running for 2 weeks. We have let it run for an additional week in order to accommodate this particular episode, since it does have to do, number one, with something of historic nature, but also because we have 6 copies rather than usually 1 or 2 items that we have to give away. This way it expands the opportunity for more people to enter the contest and have a chance to win one of these 6 copies. But it will run again through this next week, and we will announce the winners in next week's episode. So please go. It's already been running for a couple of weeks, and this will be the final week, so make sure that your name gets out there. Remember, just one entry per person, not per email, but per person. So please enter your name just once to allow other people the opportunity from around the world to possibly win one of these copies. And thank you, Charlie Randall, for offering these great prizes. Now, because they are physical copies, that means they will be shipped to you. Charlie will pay for the shipping domestically, but since it's costing a little bit more to go overseas or anywhere for foreign postage, you'll be notified as to how much that's going to cost. If your name gets randomly selected, you can then make the choice of whether you wish to reimburse for that foreign postage or just to pass, and then we will draw another name. But again, names will be randomly generated, and we will have 6 lucky winners. But the only way you're going to get a chance to possibly win is to enter the contest. So if you go to, again, themagicwordpodcast.com for this week's episode, there you will see a form you can fill out, put in your name, your email address, and again, if your name is randomly selected, then we will send you some information requesting your physical address, and then Charlie will send that out to you. We thank you guys very much for coming back this week, and also we look forward to our future episodes. We got several that are already ready to go out, and I will be reporting again next week from the convention at the Collectors Expo, and it's going to be a lot of fun, so be sure and tune in then for that. So until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to always be honest, be humble, and always be thankful. This is Scotty out.